Hey everyone, it's Katie and Adam for Stop
Hammock time, fireside chat.
Take two.
We were just talking about the hammock
I know.
today. So
Hey everyone, it's Katie and Adam for Stop
Hammock
Fireside Chat. You did that on purpose. It's still a fireside chat. In fact, this guy went and cut wood so that we would have it for a
Have a fire.
Have a fire.
For our fireside chat.
For our fireside chat, but we were just talking today about repairing.
And the warmth. Because it did snow today.
Yes. Luckily, I didn't see it. But we are so excited because we are going to have Karen Ehman and her husband, I was going to say her friend, and her husband Todd on, and we are going to talk called Keep Showing Up. And so we are delighted that we have some fellow Michiganders that are going to be on the show.
Hey.
Hello.
Hello. Hey, how are you?
We are.
You,
Go ahead.
we're here, but we don't have our splitter. Can you hear us?
We can.
We can. Okay, because I've got it in my house somewhere, and I remembered like 30 seconds ago that I was supposed to have it, but I just went time without it. The house is pretty quiet because we don't have little kids in here. So is this okay, or do I need to run and get it?
If you can get it, that'd be great.
Because there's quite a bit of an echo, yeah.
How about that March Madness?
Hey, right?
I missed the game Monday night. Or was it Monday night? Tuesday night. Monday. I was thinking about
Monday.
tomorrow. Yesterday. I'm not much for watching games, but kind of those are pretty exciting. So
it was a fantastic game.
Yeah. So, anyway.
In fact, it was probably the best tournament overall that I've seen in a long time.
Oh yeah. Well, college ball is always good. So,
Yeah. Much more enjoyable than the pros, in my opinion.
Weather better.
Yeah, we had some snow today, and it was overcast. But it's supposed to warm up by the weekend.
Yeah, they're forecasting a little bit of snow here tonight, which is a surprise to everybody. And,
Yeah.
High 50s, low 60s. So going out the next couple days.
We're going to fix the echoing in just a minute.
Okay.
I'm here. I'm splitting. I'm here.
My wife is splitting. She's here now.
I can't believe I forgot that.
No problem.
We wrestled and struggled to find ours tonight, too.
Am I using two of these or one? I thought we shared before.
No, you have one set of earphones, and I have one.
The last one we shared.
Mine are tangled. It's like one of those contests. How fast can you untangle it?
That's right. And everyone's watching. just to add to the pressure.
This does feel like a game show. Is there a prize at the end of this?
Sure.
We'll
come up with something.
Much better.
Much better.
Wow.
Thanks so much.
You turn down a little bit.
We're
all right, we're good.
Yeah.
No, we're fine.
You're good.
Well, welcome, Karen and Todd. We are so glad you guys are here. And I was scrambling to find where I'd put my headphones last time as well. So we're all in good company here.
All right.
But we are so glad you guys are here. And for those that don't know you, Karen and you, Todd, if you guys could just introduce yourselves to everyone, that would be great.
Okay, I'll let you go first.
Well, I'm not sure what you want to know, but Todd Ehman. I build cars for a living. And
you got to get close.
There we go. What else do you want to know about me, Katie? What does your audience want to hear about?
Well, what is it like being married to this woman next to you?
Oh, okay. It's time to shut off right now.
We only have how many minutes?
Oh, about 25.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, I'm sure you'll hear about it as we go through the interview, how wonderful it is to be married to Karen. So.
That's right.
Where do we meet? You can tell them that.
Oh, where do we meet? We met at
you
college.
Have to think
we met at college. Well, I love to hear her tell the story because she does such a better job, adds a lot more color to it, a lot of detail I forget. So I always let her tell the stories.
I always prefer when Katie tells the story of how we met too, because we have different, just a little different flavor to it.
Yeah. Karen?
All right, so
Yeah.
we met at college. We've been married 32 years, have 3 kids. Kenna, who is, let's see, she's almost 28. She owns her own salon in Charlotte, North Carolina. Our son Mitch just got married. Wait for it. To a girl he met on my Instagram account. A girl from Georgia, our Georgia Peach, our daughter-in-law Macy. They got married in December, and they live 3 houses down from the house Mitchell was born in the middle of Michigan in a little town. And then our youngest, Spencer, he rents a room from us. He's 21, and he's trying to figure out what he's going to do in life. He's very adventurous. Backpacked all by himself through 14 national parks last summer. And made his mama get
jealous.
Lots of gray hair. But yeah, and so I write books, he makes cars, and we keep showing up. How's that?
There you go. Sounds good to me.
Well, I have to tell you, so Adam was a community rec major at Central Michigan University, and one of his classes was winter backpacking. So they stayed in an igloo overnight, and he was so happy, and I was, hoping the igloo wouldn't cave in on him, as I was.
It was my second favorite class I ever took.
What was your first favorite class?
Advanced backpacking in Colorado. We took a week and went out to Colorado, so that was my first favorite. The winter camping and survival class was only a weekend, so it was a little less time, and but fantastic nonetheless.
Well, we are so glad that you guys took time out of your schedule to chat with us tonight. And Karen, you have a new book, Keep Showing Up. And will you tell everyone the tagline of it? Because I just love it.
How to stay crazy in love when your love drives you crazy.
Which we know nothing about.
No.
Not a thing. I mean, well, what's really exciting is Karen is a speaker with Proverbs 31 and writes for them as well. And they are doing a book club of her book, Keep Showing Up. And so if you tag a friend in the comments to let them know to tune in, one of you and the friend you tag is going to win a copy of Karen's book. So
does the person you tag have to come and watch?
Well,
no?
they should, right? Of course. And so then you guys can join up with the Proverbs 31 book club that's happening right now. So even if you and your friend don't live in the same town, you can still be a part of this book club, and we will share links to the book club and whatnot. But if you want to win a copy for you and your friend of Keep Showing Up, just tag your friend below as we are chatting. So Karen and Todd, there is conflict that happens in marriage, right? And so a lot of times people,
it's news to us too.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, they're just married to these angels of a writer. There's nothing.
We hear stories from other people.
Right. But anyway, so a lot of times people talk about communication, sex, and money as being the big 3. But Karen, you break down in your book 3 conflict areas. Do you mind talking about those with us?
Sure. So yeah, I think people mostly will bring up, it's finances, or it's raising the kids, or in-laws, or sex, or whatever it is as the greatest conflicts. But I feel like often those places are where conflict arises to the surface, but it's more how we interact over those things that really does cause the conflict. So the 3 things that I think are the greatest causes of conflict, it's really not anything original to me. It's actually something when Todd was a youth pastor a gazillion years ago when we were first married, that we heard a counselor who came in to talk to the teenagers about getting along with their parents and avoiding conflict. I heard her say these 3 things, and it so stuck with me. And I feel like as I walked through my marriage, it's so true that's why I wanted to write about them in the book. And those 3 areas are emotional baggage, things you've dragged in from your past, emotional baggage. And then the second thing is unmet expectations. You expect things are going to go down one way, or your spouse is going to behave a certain way, and then they don't. And then the third thing is untrue perceptions, that we assign a motive to our spouse. We perceive that they're behaving a certain way because they think something, and it's totally untrue. It's just a perception, but to us it's reality, and so we react. And they don't know that we're living in that little false reality. So the last one is untrue perceptions.
Yeah.
Is that a good or a bad madam?
It's a good I think you definitely hit the nail on the head. We were just having a conversation a heated conversation earlier this evening, which usually a discussion.
We're discussing something.
And I tend to be someone that likes to get all my tasks done and then relax. And Adam,
well, that's the right way to do it, right?
Right. I knew Karen would be in my corner on this one.
Hashtag Team Katie.
That's right. Made like Martha. And so Adam, he likes to come home, gives me those squeezes in the kitchen and, that kind of thing, which I love that he loves me. But at the moment when I'm, chopping vegetables for dinner or have all these things I'm trying to, kind of unwind from working throughout the day, I want us to work first and then relax. Whereas he can relax and then work, or work then relax, however he wants. But then a lot of times at the end of the day, he's ready to go to sleep because he's like, I'm done for the day and I'm just ready to relax. And so we're just talking about what you were talking about of, maybe there's some, some of these conflict areas. So with Todd, I wonder, I'm going to put you on the spot here.
I would hope so.
She's good at that.
With these three different areas, is there an example you can think of where maybe you guys had a source of conflict that stemmed back to one of these three things?
Well, I think the first one, as far as baggage, I don't know if it's a specific thing, Katie, I'm thinking of. It's just, I think what we find out is we all have filters, that when we hear something, we react to something. Well, there's a filter that we have, and I think a lot of that's our baggage. It's how we were raised, it's how we managed pain in the past, whether we ran from conflict or came after someone in conflict. So it's always a filter. So I think a lot of what we go through is just our baggage. And we've been married 33
Good job, 32.
years,
Question mark?
somewhere in there.
Almost 33.
You're still dealing with each other's baggage, and there could be lots of examples of where you put your toothpaste. It's how you put your glasses, where you put your glass on the counter, whether it's by the where the bread's stored or wherever. So I would just say in general, it's just baggage, and you always are looking to give grace to the other person because of their baggage. And I think that's helped me so much in our marriage, is that how Karen reacts is she's filtering that through something somewhere in the past and even in the present. So yeah, like I said, there's lots of things every single day we're filtering that. So
right. Well, I think that brings up a good point that you guys have been married almost 33 years. We're going to be married 18 years this summer.
That's sure.
Right?
All right, yeah.
And so I used to think, I'm thinking back to my youth group days when I was thinking about making a list about my husband and all these things.
I thought that was college.
Well, probably that too. A new list.
The list changed.
My list was basically Jesus,
I didn't meet anyone.
And he wasn't Jesus.
Other than the fact that I was married.
Right. So anyway, but I think you forget that you're constantly going to be learning. And I used to think you'd arrive at this place someday and then it'd be like smooth sailing. I don't know, my rose-colored glasses. But I think you're right. You're constantly learning. You're constantly giving grace. And I think the more you've been together, you start to learn, like you said, where those things come from, and that they're not, just an annoyance or whatever, that they're coming from a certain place and a certain filter, like you said. How about you, Karen? Do you have an example to share with us?
How long do we have? Well, I think for me, thinking about baggage is really at the heart of what baggage is it's things that were said to you or about you in your past that now you're bringing up in your mind in the conflict, but the other person doesn't know it. It's like you're standing there, each of you with your own suitcase, your own baggage, and I don't know what's in his bag and he doesn't know what's in mine, but all of a sudden something comes to the surface. Like one example I remember, I don't think he'll care that I share this, but Todd is a very brilliant man, common sense kind of guy, but he also has dyslexia. And when he first found out, when he, I think, was in the fifth grade, yeah. He remembers, not in a bad way really, but his teacher saying in front of him and his parents that he'll probably, without therapy, never be more than a gas station attendant. So he deposited that in his mind, like, oh, am I not as smart as the other kids? Or I think for reading, you said you had to go to a different reading group, and he kind of deposited that baggage in his mind as, oh, maybe I'm not, as smart as them. So one day when we were first married, he was, I thought, bluffing, like he knew something, but he didn't come clean and say that he knew it. It was just something silly. And I remember saying to him, oh, come on, stop playing dumb with me. Now, playing dumb with me means you're bluffing. You're hiding something that you really know. It doesn't mean you're stupid. But I saw like the look on his face kind of deflate. And then we kind of parted ways that the rest of the day, and he seemed like he's a little ticked off at me, and I couldn't figure out at all what I'd done wrong. And so later on in the day, I said, what's up? Why are you mad at me? Like, you're acting like something's wrong. And he said, well, I don't really appreciate you calling me stupid. And I thought, when in the heck did I call him stupid? Because I just said, quit playing dumb with me, which means quit bluffing, quit joking around. You know what I'm talking about. But his baggage, his filter heard the word dumb. And in his mind, it took a highlighter and highlighted that word. And he thought I was saying that about him, and I wasn't at all. And I think, I have my own things in my past. I've had a lot of people make comments to me, to my face or behind my back about my weight. And one day when I asked him to pick up half and half at the grocery store, he came home, he sat on the counter. I thought, what a nice husband. He picked me up half and half. And then I saw the words on the side of the half and half container. It said fat free. And I thought, oh, maybe he wishes I were a little more fat free, So it was something from my past that I took a highlighter and highlighted. It was my baggage. He didn't know. He just doesn't shop for half and half. He saw the words half and half. He grabbed the first one. He didn't know there were 15 different kinds. So I think we drag those things into our current conflict from our past, but our spouse has no idea what's in our baggage. We have our suitcases shut tight, and then they come spilling out when there's a conflict. And so really, you're kind of having a heated discussion, an issue over what you think is right here, but it's really something that was back there in your past.
Yeah. And I think that, there's a not very nice saying that says, assumptions make a butthead out of you and me. But it's true. Like, there's so many times where I'm hearing one thing and he's really not meaning that. And I think clarifying with each other, when you said that, this is what I heard, or what did you hear when I said that?
Right.
Because even this evening, Adam's like, I'm not saying that, what you're hearing. And I think clarifying some of those things, and then it gives us an opportunity to maybe dig a little of where is this coming from? So I think that that's so important because, like you said, Karen, you could just keep fighting about that issue out here. And sometimes we don't even remember, these instances, you guys could pinpoint a moment. But I think sometimes it's a whole lens. My kind of wound I live with, and I think it's a lot self-induced, is I'm not good enough. And so if someone, is pointing out something I could do better, I'm already so hard on myself. So then I just feel well, yep,
right.
Why even try? I'm awful. I'll never, I tried my best. It wasn't good enough. And, that kind of thing. So so obviously you guys you've kept showing up in your marriage, and I'm thinking about people tuning in right now. If they're well, that's great for you guys. You seem to communicate well, but what do you say to someone that they feel no, we do exactly.
That's one of those areas.
Oh, I'm sorry. The Sunday school answer is yes. We do very good at communication.
That's one of those areas that when we talk about that, and in comparison to even sex, you go, I don't think you ever kind of arrive and say, no, we're good enough in the communication area. We don't need to work on that anymore.
We all need to grow. But what if there's a marriage out there where one of the people in the marriage feels like they're trying to communicate, or they're trying to bring up some of these things, these communication things you said, and the other person just really isn't, in it with them, or maybe it's, partly personality or how they were brought up. Do you guys have any advice for them?
Well, that's the hard thing about marriage. When you think about other issues in your life, if you decide you want to be more productive, or you want to be a better decision maker, or you want to step it up with exercise or whatever. Those are goals you can have for yourself and you can work to make them happen. But with marriage, it's sticky because there's two people. So you can't have goals for your spouse. You can have desires that they behave a certain way, but you can't have goals for them. And it takes two people to make a great marriage. Unfortunately, it only takes one cashing out to make the marriage get kind of rocky. So what I always try to encourage people, especially women that I talk to at my events or, through my blog or whatever, is you just have to remember that it all comes down to you and Jesus. Like, you cannot make your spouse do anything. You can't control how they behave and how they act. You can only control your own reactions to their behavior. And when you get to heaven someday, God is not going to ask you anything about your spouse's behavior. He's going to ask you, regardless of how your spouse treated you, were you kind? Were you loving? Were you forgiving? Did you wipe the slate clean and grant grace over and over again? It all comes down to you and Jesus. And that, it sounds really lofty, but it does help you keep your perspective, because if you try to make it your goal that your spouse is going to react a certain way, you're going to drive yourself completely insane because you have no control over it.
Right. And them too.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think with that, I think the unmet expectations goes along with that, is that expect zero from your spouse, if I could say that. There's a lot of what goes on in marriage nowadays is, write down a list of 4 or 5 things that are my needs. And I share that with Karen. She writes down 4 or 5 things that are her needs. I think that sets up for failure. I think it's going to take a needle in a haystack marriage that can work with that and understand that and be mature with that. But I would tell a young couple, when you continue to do that, this is what I need and this is what I need, you're always going to expect failure on another person because they're sinners. They're imperfect. They just like you are. And so be cautious to expect zero from a marriage, because really Jesus is the one that's going to hold you up, and the other person is human. You can talk about those things that you feel as though that you may need your marriage, but after you have that discussion, just wipe that what's one thing?
Slate clean.
Slate completely clean, and know they may never meet that need in your life, and that's okay.
Right. Yeah, and I think
that's something that we even teaching our kids, and that's so good because we need to hear it as well. Just that idea of you're not responsible for the other person, but he did this, or but she did this, or but wait, what did you do? Let's not talk about them. You can only control what you do, and so that's really good.
Yeah, and I think too, a lot of times, I know we were guilty of this when we were dating. We really made each other our Lord, which is really dangerous. They were our everything, right? And so
then when I don't meet something, a need or a desire or an expectation, that is like devastating, because we've created an idol in our life, and our spouse can be our idol.
Yeah, you're exactly right. That's where I see a lot of people, and where I have in my own marriage. You just hit a wall, because you're going to your spouse for things that only God can give you. Only God can know your every thought. Only God can meet your every need. Only God can truly make you joyful. And when you try to put your spouse in the place of God, they're going to fail every single time. I remember Lisa Turkhurst saying to me one time, when I was probably on the phone complaining about something with God, and like, he didn't do this, he didn't. I remember her saying, Karen, even the very best spouse makes a very poor God. He's not your God. He's not going to make you happy. So quit looking to him to make you happy. That. Yeah.
And I think that's where the problem with the phrase is. People say, well, we've known so many people our age and people that are married for a long time. Well, why are you deciding to get out of the marriage? Because we're not happy. Well, that's a statement of expectations. Yeah. This person's not making me feel happy. And to be honest, marriage is not about being happy. It's about being content, serving people together. And you have to avoid the feeling aspect of it. And that's what happens with the expectations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You mentioned that word contentment. We, in our men's Bible study the other day, we were just finishing up Philippians, where Paul says, I learned to be content in all situations. And then the very next thing that he said, or maybe it's the next verse, he says, and I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. And so learning the contentment wasn't necessarily easy for Paul. He's saying, I had to learn this, And the only way I was able to learn it was through the strength of Christ. It's not my own strength. And so I thought that was, and you said the word contentment, and that triggered that. But yeah, that's spot on.
Yeah.
Well, in our sinful nature is not to be content.
Yeah,
That's,
selfish.
And so
right.
that's why, like you said, Adam, we have to learn that. It's something that we have to learn.
Yeah.
Right. Well, if you're just tuning in, we have Karen and Todd Ehman here. We're talking about Karen's new fabulous book, Keep Showing Up. It will help strengthen your marriage. But if you would like to win a copy for yourself and a friend, just go ahead and tag your friend, and we'll choose one of you and your friend will each get a copy. And Proverbs 31 is the online Bible study is going through Karen's book right now. And so you guys can hop into that if you're not a part of it already. So be sure to do that. You can do it anytime as we're talking. Audie, we saw you here, and we're so glad to see you. Joel, Gloria, hey, everybody.
Audie, don't you dare sneak in here after however long it is and just kind of hide in the background there.
So any last things, you guys, of just some encouragement for marriage that are maybe struggling in one of these areas with this, the baggage, the expectations, the untrue perceptions? Any last thoughts?
Probably, well, we didn't really talk a ton about untrue perceptions, and probably I would say learn to not assign motives to your spouse that aren't there. And I do this all the time. So like I'm the queen of doing this. If I remember one time we were in I think a grocery store. It was a department store or grocery store. But anyway, we ran into somebody that Todd works with. And I'm standing there, kind of like I am tonight, hair in a ponytail, sweatshirt on, not looking the cutest, and I don't think I had a stitch of makeup on. And we ran into this guy, and Todd's sitting talking to him. They're talking about work, how's it going, blah, blah, blah. And the whole time I'm standing there going, when's he going to introduce me? And he never introduced me. And so I assigned a motive. I had this untrue perception. I assigned a motive that he's embarrassed about what I look like today. And so he didn't introduce me to his friend. And so my mind started crafting all these, nasty things I was going to say to him, and how dare you, and that hurt my feelings, and you're ashamed of me, and I'm, spending all this mental energy because I had assigned a motive to him that wasn't there. So as I started unloading on him, I unload sometimes, don't I? You can say it's, yes, I do.
Yeah, sometimes.
I started unloading on him, and he's like, Karen, calm down. He couldn't remember the guy's first name. And so he was embarrassed to say, this is my wife, Karen. This is, I don't know, he worked 3 people down from me, but his name escaped him. 10 seconds later, he remembered his name. But right then, he panicked because he couldn't remember his name. So I spent all this energy assigning a motive that wasn't there and causing all this conflict. And we need to one of the things that we say at Proverbs, one of our core family values at Proverbs 31 is, believe the best, don't assume the worst. And so I think that that's a good thing to remember when it comes to these perceptions. Don't just assume the worst and assign this motive. Believe the best and ask questions like, hey, you didn't introduce me to that guy. It kind of hurt my feelings. Are you embarrassed by what I look like today? And then he would say, no, I forgot the guy's name. So I wouldn't have spent all this mental energy loading my guns, ready to shoot at him because he didn't introduce me to his friends. So I think, and I'm preaching to myself on this one because I'm terrible at this, but if I can learn to not just jump to the worst conclusion and assume the worst and assign a motive that was never intended, but can just ask, when you said this, I feel like you were saying X, Y, Z. Is that true? Rather than just go ahead and jump to the conclusion.
Right. Well, and I think too, if it went down this second way, it also gives Todd then the opportunity to hear, my wife might be feeling insecure right now, and how can I lean in, to that? But I'm like you, Karen. I see, I don't know if you're this way. I see the world, the glass is half empty. So and Adam sees it as half full. And so that's the lens by which we're already seeing just basic things. And so when we have conflict, I'm going to the worst, motives and thoughts or whatever. And poor guy, it's just that happens a lot of times. And like you said, you spend so much emotional energy on that. It's hard, even when you realize that wasn't the motive to kind of wind that down, you know, because you're locked and loaded and ready to go. I know for us sometimes when we bring up areas of conflict, like Adam is a pretty laid back guy. So you know that he's pretty upset, like if he has to talk to me about something, my wayward ways, you know. But I often get defensive and try to like just find something to come back that he needs to work on too. And the other day, he nicely but clearly said, that was kind of out of left field, that area you brought up. And I'm like, you're right. My feelings were hurt. So I was trying to make you have to work on something too. Right. So yeah, clarifying those, the untrue perceptions. And I just wonder if you guys are brave enough tuning in, raise your hand if you've done that, you know, in the last week of just, are you raising your hand or is that a head scratch?
No, I scratched my hand. But I will raise my hand.
Watch that hand.
Yeah. No, but I would also say that when you ask those clarifying questions, it gives your spouse an opportunity to understand you a little bit more instead of just getting all defensive and then having to recover from something. Whereas, you know, so when you say, you know, hey, when you said this is how I heard it. This is how it made me feel. Is that what you intended? And then, so then if that's the case, then I go, okay, that caused her to feel a certain way. And so if there's any ways that I can avoid her feeling that way again, I'm hopefully learning from that, whether it's a mistake or just a misunderstanding. Hopefully I'm learning from that and then learning something a little bit more about her and how we can relate better the next time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think for me, the last words of wisdom I'd say is just extend a lot of grace. There's times I don't like Karen, to be honest with you, but the cross extends love despite how I feel, despite my emotions. She's still a person that God has created, and I have to extend that grace. I know I say it very flowingly and very easily right now. It doesn't always happen that way. And the only way I can extend grace to Karen is to experience grace in my own life, to understand I'm a sinner and what Christ did for me and what God does for me daily, moments, the thoughts I might think, the actions I might do. There's grace upon grace in my life, and the only way I can extend grace to her is to experience that grace that God has given me, and remember, God has been gracious to me. I have to be grateful to my spouse, gracious to my spouse as well. So she's going to mess up, I'm going to mess up, and that's where the cross comes in, and that's where forgiveness comes in. And those are feeling are not attached to that whatsoever. It's a choice we make based on what we know to be true. And the feelings may not come. I mean, as we make the right choices, the feelings might come, but they may not come. But we've done the right thing because Christ has done that for us as well.
Yeah, that's a good. We mention that whenever we're doing marriage counseling, we always try to say, you know, hey, you're not going to like each other all the time, and that because as you're going into marriage, I mean, I remember. It was just like, oh, we're going to get married. We're going to be so in love. We're just going to sit on the couch and make googly eyes at each other and kiss all the time. And it's just going to be bliss, you know. And but the reality of the situation is, I don't.
Be careful now, Adam.
Yeah, no, I don't necessarily like you all the time, but I do love you and I'm committed to you. And that's where again, that's you brought up divorce earlier and saying, you know, I think people. Yeah, when the feelings go, or I don't feel like I love you, or I don't feel like I like you right now, that a lot of people jump ship at that point. Well, the commitment and the love and the grace, like you said, cover the times where we may not like each other at a specific moment. So,
well, I think bringing this up. Go ahead, Todd. Yeah.
That we need to understand that's where God works is in the weaknesses, the things that we do wrong. And so when people say, hey, I'm not happy or whatever, you know, God doesn't work in the midst of our emotions as much as I think he does in the rawness of our pain, our wanting to leave. That's where we have a story about God and how we can say, you know, this is how I felt, but God stepped in, we allowed him to step in, and this is why our marriage is better as a result of that.
Yeah,
that's great. And, you know, I think this is so important to talk about. I mean, when we were first in pre-marriage counseling, I'm sure if they said, you're not going to like each other sometimes, we've been like, oh, we always will, But I think it's important for people to hear this from people that have been married for a long time, because not to be discouraging, but to realize like, hey, if I feel like that too, that doesn't mean that's my free pass out of here.
Right.
That means
Right.
it's time to call out to the Lord. Well, it's always time for that, right? But that's why we need a savior. And I think marriage can be such a picture of that we have desperate need for Jesus, because we can't do this on our own strength. There's so many nuances. There's so many things we all bring to the table. Well, Karen and Todd, thank you so much for being here tonight. We're talking about Karen's book, Keep Showing Up. We're going to share links to all these things. If you guys have any questions, feel free to leave them below, and be sure to tag a friend in the comments, because you and a friend could win a copy of Karen's book, Keep Showing Up. Well, just in closing, I don't know if I asked. Yeah, why? Is that okay?
Todd and I didn't get a chance to talk about building cars at all.
Okay. Carry on.
No, go ahead.
No, really, that's okay, kid.
We'll have to
Sorry.
do that another time.
That'll be another one.
That's
Yeah,
right.
right.
That's right. But I don't know if I asked you this ahead of time or not, Karen, but would you guys be willing to just close us in prayer? I'm just praying for marriages to be strengthened and for us to just keep showing up by God's grace.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
sure.
You can.
Father, we are so thankful that you are very, very perfect in the midst of our imperfections. We thank you that, Father, the ugliness sometimes that we portray to other people, somehow you can make beauty out of that. We thank you for the cross, for the forgiveness of what that means, for the change of life it has given us. And I thank you for marriage, because I truly believe it's the picture that really shows the grace of God when two people are so different that you've brought together. That you just continue to show what it means to have imperfection brought together, and we are glorified. So I pray for people that are thinking about maybe stepping out of a marriage, that you just touch their heart, you'd move with them, that you'd make a difference, and that your Holy Spirit would speak to them and how they need to hear you at this moment.
Amen.
Amen.
Well, thanks so much again for being here. And
Thank you.
this is Katie and Adam for Stop
Fireside
Chat. He was going to mess it up again, but he chose not to. Thanks, babe. See you guys later.
Bye.
Thanks. See ya.